lot at the end, and it won't take up a lot of your time. But first, please welcome Christine Blair.
Okay, well, first of all, I want to thank you all for coming here today to rally for education. This is fantastic. I think probably last week when Michael Gove was at the Spectator Conference, it wasn't a room full of people like this, shouting and rallying and making a lot of noise. So I think we are the people in this room who've got the good ideas, who know what we want, and what's more, we've now got a plan about how we're going to get it. And there is absolutely, in this room and elsewhere, an absolute mounting sense of anger and injustice about what's being done by this government and by this Secretary of State in particular. I just want to start by saying this. Pasi Sahlberg, some of you may have heard of him, he was the very last Chief Inspector of Education in Finland. 2 weeks after he got the job, they abolished inspection in Finland, and they are still... He's quite nice, actually. They were going to abolish it anyway. And they are still the top performing country. So there's something that Michael Gove could stop, pause and reflect about. But the thing about Pasi Sahlberg is, since he stopped working in Finland, he's gone around doing speaking tours, and he talks about something called the Global Education Reform Movement. Reflect on that a moment. That gives you the acronym GERM. And this is because all over the world, and you know, in a lot of cases we're in the lead, unfortunately, here in England and Wales. There is this really nasty little thing, a germ in fact, which is wreaking havoc on our public services, but here we are today to talk about education in particular. And we are here today because we are absolutely concerned about education. In fact, we're passionate about it. I don't think there's a single speaker who didn't come to the rostrum, to the microphone and say, I'm here because I'm passionate about education. And we all know that a good education is what characterises the very greatest likelihood of a young person having a successful future, of being a self-confident adult, of being someone with agency who understands their own lives. And we in this room, we want the very best education for our own children, but of course we want the very best education for all children. We want a system and a service that responds to the needs and desires of all children and young people. And the point is that actually we know how to provide it. Michael Gove needs to be listening to teachers and parents and governors and young people, and in particular to the profession, because we do know how to do that. We want a public education system where all schools are good and improving, because actually we all believe that everyone can improve. Not requires improvement, as we heard from the head, because 2 years ago you didn't hit your floor targets. I went to a school in my own home authority, Hammersmith and Fulham, last week. All the teaching that they saw was good or better. All of it was good or better, and yet the school was likely to come out as requires improvement, because last year, when they had a different head and a very largely different teaching force, they didn't hit their floor targets. How can that be reasonable? How can it be that you're saying to the local parents who want to send their kids there in September of this year, this school isn't really good enough, when actually now it absolutely is? So it's just a ridiculous system. And the fact is that we want a system not characterised by Michael Wilshaw and his cohorts. We want a system where schools are self-improving. We're not, as Michael Gove would have it, the enemies of promise. We're not, as Jack said, the people who robbed children of GCSE grades that they had actually achieved. And we're not the people who are going around saying to teachers, you have to use synthetic phonics day in, day out to teach reading, whether you think it's right or not. A test on 5-year-olds where they have to read words, some of which are not even words. So we are actually now genuinely testing nonsense. And we are the people seeking to impose on schools a national curriculum which the profession doesn't think is acceptable and which frankly won't be a national curriculum, because if you're an academy or a free school, you can choose not to do it. So we know this from our classroom practice, and we know it, if we're parents or guardians or we ever speak to children, we know that if people live with persistent criticism and name-calling and undermining, then ultimately they become demoralised. That's not the way that you can run an education service. We know that teachers have lost confidence in the Secretary of State. A number of us said that at our conferences over Easter in various kinds of ways. And we know too, from the research, a colleague mentioned it earlier, that we've done, the YouGov research that we've done, that only 6% of parents think that Michael Gove has done anything positive for education in the whole time he's been in office. I am actually trying to find out who they are. I would like to have a one-to-one conversation with them. None of these policies is having, according to 94% of parents, a positive impact on education. And we all know, I think, and we've mentioned this, that the direction of travel about this is not about, Michael Gove will occasionally say to you, this is about every child being able to do their best. Well, we reject that, even if he believes that, and maybe he does, even if he believes that, then what he's doing to try and achieve that is completely the wrong thing. We know that this is really about privatisation, it's about driving down costs, it's about undermining public sector ethos, something which those of us in this hall, I think, all value very highly. It's about holding down public sector pay, attacking benefits of those who receive them. And, we all, I'm sure that teachers in this classroom are actually teaching children on a day-to-day basis who are worried now that the roof might be taken from over their heads because their parents can't pay the bedroom tax. It's just wicked. And then, of course, last week, the Public Accounts Committee, that august body, has shown us that actually Michael Gove's own department is engaged in profligate spending on his vanity project of free schools and academies. Quite a lot of these free schools, by the way, opening up as secondary schools in places where there's a crying need for primary school places. That doesn't make any sense whatsoever on any basis. And the money being cut, though, from projects in order to improve and maintain existing schools. So we all know that austerity, whether it's at the DFE or elsewhere, isn't working. And even a large number of economists agree. And across the trade union movement, which is the movement that believes in social justice, we need to make common cause with other unions, but also with other campaigns, with governors, with young people. Isn't he fabulous, Jack? Because the fact is that we believe that there is an alternative. And it isn't even, as they say, rocket science. We can get the economy moving if we increase the wages of those who, when they get an increase, will actually spend it, rather, and that of course includes teachers, rather than paying bonuses to the very, very ludicrously and obscenely highly paid who will just add this bonus to their already accruing massive millions. So the fact is that there is an alternative. We need jobs for young people. We need jobs for young people who go to university and those who choose to go straight into the workforce from school. And we need an education service that can seek to help every young child fulfil their potential. We need teachers who can develop a curriculum appropriate to those ends. You heard that from the classroom teacher from Chorley, didn't you? Children change every year, so should the curriculum. You can't just expect to do the same thing. It's like, it's like the kind of archetype of someone going abroad and just saying the same thing more loudly and hoping that it'll have a different effect. It isn't a sensible way to approach the curriculum. So. But we also need teachers who are accountable through a proper professional system inspection. And finally, we need teachers who will stay in the profession because they can earn fair pay on a fair basis, not the divisive system envisaged by government. The fact is that nowhere in the world is there any evidence that relating teachers' pay to student outcomes improves student outcomes. There is no evidence to show that. But of course there's a wealth of evidence that it demoralises teachers, that it sets teachers against teachers, it brings in perverse incentives and all of those kinds of things. So we do need teachers with decent pay. But the fact is, teachers do their best because they want to and they need to, not so that they can try and get a pay rise at the expense of somebody else. But of course they deserve decent pay. And I'm afraid that for the most part, we simply can't work in classrooms till we're 68. So the fight on pensions does go on. So here in the Northwest, members of the NACWT and the NUT are, as Patrick said at the top of the rally, in the vanguard. Teachers in the Northwest will be taking strike action on June the 27th, but they won't be on their own because we are setting up twinning, and we know that all over the country other teachers will be sending messages of solidarity and support, and we know, we can tell from this rally, that teachers won't be on their own because parents and governors and young people will be supporting us. And the fact is that this is part of our rolling programme of action, and not, I'm bound to say, because we want to go on strike, but because everything else we have tried has not made Michael Gove change his mind or his policies. Colleagues and friends, you've heard from the real experience from schools, you've heard the passion in this room that's buoyed people up. Teachers together, in the NACWT and the NUT, we will work alongside all of those who want a decent and fair and reasonable education system and decent and fairly paid public sector workers and teachers. We will work together, we will campaign together, we will take strike action together, and believe me, ultimately, we will win. Thank you very much.